I got behind the desk as an escrow officer. It is a whole different world, completely different. It's like you don't want to see how the sausage is made. In the state of Texas, if you die without a will, Texas has a will for you. Somebody dies without a will, all of their interest goes somewhere. Sometimes those kids are in prison. Sometimes those kids are in another country. Sometimes they're estranged, and we've got to go find these missing heirs. As an investor, you get a relationship with an escrow officer. This person will make your life so much easier.
Welcome back to the Hybrid Real Estate Professional Podcast, the show where we help you build a life of abundance through real estate and small business investing without compromising what matters most. Today's guest is my friend Andy Hemmings from Capital Title, where his role is to help get real estate transactions closed the right way while serving as a resource to address questions before, during, and after the transaction. Andy's been in and around the real estate industry for decades in a variety of capacities, starting as a licensed broker in the late 90s, an escrow officer more recently, and a hands-on investor across single-family, small multifamily, and light commercial along the way. He now invests passively in syndications and brings a unique perspective, having seen deals from both sides of the closing table. And on top of it all, he is a proud father and husband, and a very generous human being who goes out of his way to add value to those around him. Andy, welcome to the show. I'm glad to have you here.
Thank you. That made me tired listening to all that. Wow, done a lot. Yeah, no, I really appreciate being here. I know we've just recently met, and I was so happy to meet you, and I loved hearing your story. You got a fantastic story, and congratulations on your recent successful acquisition and closing.
Yeah, thank you so much. And like you said, we met recently, but I feel like we hit it off very well, and I can tell kind of the type of person you are. And like I meant what I said in the intro. You go out of your way to educate others and provide your perspective, and that's what this show is all about. So I was excited to have you on.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, so there are a few different layers we can peel back here, but I think it would be great to start with just kind of your current job at Capital Title, and spend a little time on some of the kind of key concepts that investors should know that they might not. And I'll include myself in that category because, admittedly, as long as I've been doing real estate, which is not that long, but about 8 years into it, and I would say title is kind of one of my biggest blind spots. I know enough to be dangerous and enough to keep the lights on, but I'm sure there's a lot I don't know too. So let's start with what is the title company's role in a real estate transaction, and maybe we can dig in from there.
Sure. Just a quick backdrop to further illuminate what you just mentioned. I was a real estate broker for 20 years. I sold real estate, and so I raised my family, had a wonderful career, loved it. And then there came a point where the kids were grown, were moved out, and I wanted a more stable work schedule. And when you sell real estate, you work all the time, and I loved it. Like I said, it was wonderful. But I wanted a more stable, predictable schedule. And so, as fate would have it, a friend of mine was running a local title company, and he brought me in as an escrow officer. Now, keep in mind, I've been selling real estate for 20 years. I had a local real estate school. I had a CE school where I would teach realtors about real estate. I mean, I knew my stuff, right? You tell you what, I got behind the desk as an escrow officer. It is a whole different world, completely different. And just to your point there's just so much that happens behind the scenes at a title company that you just don't know about. And you probably never will know about. It's like you don't want to see how the sausage is made sometimes. So it was really eye-opening to me when I started working as an escrow officer, and just all of the work that goes into making sure that not only does the transaction closes, but that it is a property that the buyer can feel comfortable and confident in purchasing, that there's not going to be anything that comes back on them from a legal standpoint, let's say, to make it simple, whether it be liens or prior ownership interests or something like that. So that's one of the main roles of the title company. Is we do deep research on the ownership history of the property. We pull any document that's been recorded that relates to the property, and we then issue basically what's called a title commitment. Think of it as a research paper for the property. and it'll list any liens that are associated with the property. It'll list any potential, it'll list who is legally entitled to the property. Sometimes you think you're dealing with the person that owns the property. That's not always the case. There's more people involved. And it really goes back to, there's a lot of different ways that someone can acquire interest in a property. They can get it through transfer of ownership in a deed. Simple, right? They can get it through a divorce. They can get it through heirship. And so all of these different ways that a person acquires ownership interest in a property has a direct impact on how that closing flows and how it happens. And so that is a big part of what we do right there. And then, of course, another big part, we look for any liens associated with the property, whether it be a mortgage lien, judgment lien, tax lien, and all those have to be satisfied before closing. Because when it closes, we issue what's called a title insurance policy. We're on the hook, okay? And the buyer can then know that, all right, if anything pops up in the future that was an issue prior to closing, that title policy will cover it. And so title insurance is unique in that regard, in that it is backwards looking instead of forward facing. Like a home insurance, auto insurance, you're insuring against things that might happen. Title insurance looks backwards. We're insuring about things that from the past. So that's what the title policy is all about. And title insurance has been around since the mid-ish 1800s, and before that, people, when you bought a property, it was buyer beware. Yeah, it was buyer beware. There was no guarantee that what you were buying, you actually had full ownership interest in it. That is a very quick and dirty, not dirty, but a very quick summation of what title insurance is. Now, there's a lot of other things that we do that go into it, we can kind of unpack, but in essence, that's what we do.
Yeah, no, that's a really good overview. And what's interesting, I look back at the first property we bought. It was not a rental property. My wife and I, we bought it just as a primary, and it was the first time we'd ever gone through a mortgage transaction. There's paperwork flying back and forth between your loan officer. A title company got looped in at some point, but I didn't really know what they were doing.
Yeah.
I showed
Yeah.
up there to sign the documents at the closing, and there was 100, plus pages to sign. There were deeds, there were notes, there were title, policies, there was, all sorts of applications. And you're kind of just like, when I think about now, it's a lot of new stuff at once, especially when you're new to real estate. And it's really virtually impossible to self-educate, in one single transaction when there's that many new things. So I guess
Right.
where I'm going with it is, why is it such a afterthought in general when you look at real estate education and when you look at the different things that people are learning about? I feel like title is pretty far down the list of things that people go out of their way to learn the intricacies of. Why do you think that is? And maybe should it be a higher priority than it is?
I think that's a great question, and I think that the assumption is that the deal it's going like it's going to close, like the title it's going to happen, and the due diligence that buyers go through, they've got the due diligence with the loan process. They've got to work with the loan officer directly, right? Got to check their income, got to check their debt. They go through that whole loan application process. So the buyer is directly involved in that process. Buyer's also directly involved in the due diligence on the condition of the home. Got to get your home inspection, make sure that happens, right? They don't even think about title. Why do you think about title? Heck, the title company, you just go there. They're the people that just throw the papers in front of you and you sign them. That's all they care to know about until there's a problem that pops up. That's when you generally learn about what happens at the title company, is when a problem pops up. And I don't know, Aaron, there's certain common issues that do tend to happen that I think it's definitely good for real estate agents to know about. But as a buyer or a seller, I don't know. There's just so much that's involved in it. It would be impossible to know everything. And so with an inspection, it's a pretty defined parameters on what you do. You have a home inspection. With a loan application, it's pretty defined parameters. You fill out this application and they check everything out. With the title process, there are so many different things that can happen. It's literally impossible to educate someone on everything. One of the a couple of the main issues that happen that prevent a deal from closing, or at least delay the deal. Now, with this said, most all deals we can get them closed with enough time and sometimes some money too to get legal work done to clear up the title. We can get it closed, but the most common thing that it definitely from a residential side, and sometimes on a commercial side too, would be heirship issues. Somebody dies without a will, right? Somebody dies without a will, and now that person that died, all of their interest goes somewhere. It either goes to their spouse or it goes to their children from a prior marriage. And that's when problems really develop. As they didn't have a will, they died, they had children from prior marriage. Now all their interest goes to those kids. Sometimes those kids are in prison. Sometimes those kids are in another country. Sometimes they're estranged. And we've got to go find these missing heirs and get them to sign. And then we have to break it to the surviving spouse. Hey, that half interest is not coming to you. It's going to those kids that you don't like and you don't know where they are. So that's probably one of the main things that happens that kind of fouls up a closing, if you will. Sometimes there's big things like tax liens. The owner did not pay their income taxes, and the IRS will file a lien. And I mean, I've seen deals where there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars of tax liens on a property that the sales proceeds are not going to, they're not going to satisfy that lien. So we've got to work with the IRS, get a partial release of lien. That definitely delays things. So that's just a couple of the, just kind of some big things to be aware of. Beyond that, there's just so many different potential fail points that can happen. Most of the times things go smoothly, but those are a couple of big ones. And I will say this, Aaron, that from an investor standpoint, depending on the type of investment, the title issues are going to be completely different. For instance, let me give you the opposite ends of the spectrum. If you are a wholesaler, you heard of wholesalers, right? Your issues are going to be heirship issues because you're dealing with distressed properties. You're going out, you're digging up these properties. More than half the time, they are going to have problems in the chain of title from an ownership standpoint. I mean, their titles are just dirty, right? And they got to be cleaned up. On the opposite end of the spectrum, let's say you're doing a development. Let's say you're buying an apartment complex. You're dealing with a business entity, and you're not going to really have any heirship issues or anything like that, or very, very rarely. So the issues on that end may be something completely different. There might be a judgment against the owner that's got to be cleared up or something like that. That would be a real common one. Or if it's a development deal, there may be some easements going across the property that are going to potentially affect the buyer's intended use of the property. Completely different than the other end. So depending on where you are on that investment spectrum, you're going to run into some different issues.
I'm learning a thing or two about easements running through properties on developments in real time. So that one hit home for sure. But no, it's interesting to hear that whole spectrum. And you're right, like the context matters. And me and my wife buying a primary home where largely like our agent, the lender, and the title company are going to do most of this work for us. You're right. Maybe it's not that super important that we get really deep into the researching all the title, because largely those issues will be surfaced to us by the professionals that are in charge of it. But if you're out there hunting off-market deals or wholesaling or going after distressed properties, well, those you might be able to buy them at a discount, but you're going to have to clean up whatever baggage comes with them. And most likely they're going to have these unconventional situations. And so maybe it's with the level of complexity of the deal or the different profiles of property that you're going after. That's when you probably need to spend time really educating yourself on those risks. But what's interesting about kind of some of the stuff you're saying is that the title company, assuming it's a good reputable title company, you're providing it as a service, right? Like you're going to uncover the issues and likely at least have some idea how to fix it, if not be able to go fix it for a buyer or a seller. And I guess, like, what is the extent? So you mentioned tax liens. There could be hundreds of thousands of dollars of tax liens. Do you help clear that up, or do you just say, hey, this is a problem and this is a liability you're going to have to assume with the purchase of this property? Like what is the actual interaction in a scenario like that?
Another excellent question. All right. So we work on a contingency basis, if you will. All right. We don't get paid till the deal closes. So it's in our interest to get the deal closed, but we are going to make sure that it's all of the issues are cleared up, issues that could be a potential claim against the title policy. But we're going to do everything we can within reason to get it closed. You mentioned tax lien, so let's take that one. That's a fairly easy one to explain, at least. Whenever you have an IRS lien on the property, it's really the seller's responsibility to work with the IRS and get it cleared up. But let's think about that. You're I don't know how to put it lightly, but you're dealing with a person who doesn't pay their taxes. They're not the most responsible individual. They're not somebody you can count on to follow through on doing what needs to be done. That's the truth of the matter. So we end up having to drive the ship a bit more to get it done. Now in that situation, we have to get the seller to sign a document to the IRS that authorizes us to communicate on their behalf. There's a name for the form. I can't think of it right now, but that's what it does. Basically, the seller has to give us authorization, has to give authorization to the IRS for us to communicate with them. And from there, we can steer the ship a bit better and bring it home. But until that point, until we have that authorization, there's nothing we can do. There's one example. Another example is I mentioned that sometimes there's a person who was entitled that died without a will. In the state of Texas, if you die without a will, Texas has a will for you, and it's called the law of descent and distribution. And it is a statutory process by which that owner's interest that died, where their interest goes to, and the first is to their kids. So we do what we can. First of all, we educate them on, hey, this is what's going on. So we have to be the bearer of bad news. We get that title commitment back. We do that research. We find out, okay, here's a person that was entitled. They died. They didn't have a will. First, we have to educate them on this is what's happening. A lot of times that's quite shocking to the seller, the surviving spouse, that they're losing half the interest in the property. Sometimes it's shocking to the buyer as well, because they thought they were going to close next week. It's probably not going to close next week now. So we have to educate everybody. From there, we provide the documents that need to be filled out in order for us to get the deal to closing. And in this case, it's called an affidavit of heirship. That's a whole conversation in of itself. But the affidavit of heirship is the process through which we can get those other individuals into title so they can sign, not get them into title, but bring them in so they can sign and convey their interest over to the other party. So we help a lot with that. We give them the paperwork. We educate them. We direct the seller to talk to the consulate if the person is in another country, because if this heir is in another country, they have to go sign at a consulate. We help educate them throughout all of it. Sometimes it gets to a point where there's no more we can do. Like, let's say the person just can't be located. And it's funny, Aaron, they think that we can just go find them. Well, this is y'all's problem. Y'all go find them. It's like, no, this really isn't our problem. This is something that is caused by the fact that you didn't have a will. It's not our job to go find these people,
Yeah.
And so sometimes we get put in that position. We just have to tell them, look, you need to get an attorney or literally hire a private investigator or something like that to go find these people. So the short answer is we do everything to the extent that we can, and because we want the deal to close too. And you mentioned service. We provide a service, and I'm glad you said that, because yes, we sell title insurance, but our real product is service. That's what we're selling, because a lot of people don't know, title insurance is regulated by the state of Texas. The cost is regulated. Title policy is the same no matter where you go. Doesn't matter which title company you close at in Texas, the title premium is going to be exactly the same. There may be a little bit of difference in what's called the settlement fee or escrow fee, but it's literally going to be within a couple $100 or so. So for all intents and purposes, title companies don't compete on price. We compete on service. And just to go ahead and toot our horn right now, Capital Title, we are known for our service, not only working, with homeowners, but especially with investors. We have an outstanding teams of closers that deal with uh, investors from across the spectrum, from the wholesalers that we talked about, fix and flippers, all the way up to the largest commercial, most complex deal you could imagine. We have teams of closers and attorneys that can get these deals closed.
No, that's amazing. Thank you for breaking it down because I think there's just so much behind the scenes that, yeah, even admittedly, I don't think I fully understand. And what
Hmm.
I do know though is that title, issues can kill deals or at a minimum, like you said,
Yeah,
significantly delay them. And
yeah,
it's something like where having a go-to or a dependable company or an escrow officer, especially if you're doing anything off market, it's a must. It's not that's not something you want to. You find a great deal, you find the buyer, but you don't have your title company picked out. Like you could get stuck in that process, and that's
mm,
not something you want to just like Google and be like, let me go find a title company, right? Like maybe be a little more methodical about it and find
yeah,
someone who you can build a long-term partnership with, because I'm sure, like you said, you get paid by transaction. And if an investor wants to build a long-term relationship with you and they're bringing you repeat business, then it becomes a win-win, and you can trust each other and understand each other over time. So it's a great asset for an investor as well.
yes, and I'm glad you mentioned that too, because we're part of the closing team. We are obviously an integral part of the closing team. I always recommend getting a real estate agent. I mean, I was one for 20 years. That's how I made a living. And a real estate agents are going to perform services for you and get you in the right deals and keep you out of the wrong deals more than you would ever care to realize. So I always recommend having an agent. If you don't have an agent, and it you need to have a relationship with the title company, period. And we've got, I think we're up to 120 or so offices across the state of Texas now. And by the way, we close deals all over the country, but here in Texas, we started here in Texas, and we have 120 offices, across all the major metroplexes and beyond. Highly recommend that as an investor, you get a relationship with an escrow officer. You need a go-to person. This person will make your life so much easier. They will help you if you're just looking at a deal and you're concerned about something. You can just call them up and they'll help you. If you've got a deal with another title company and you don't understand what's going on and they're not explaining things correctly, and trust me, that can happen. When you have a relationship with an escrow officer, they will help explain things even if it's not their deal. They'll at least educate you on it because that's what we do. We provide a service. So, to your listeners out there, if you do not have a relationship with an escrow officer and with a title company, I think you're going to put my contact information in there. Let me know because I can connect you with an escrow officer anywhere across the state that will be able to handle whatever type of deal you're working. Like I said, if you're just an entry level investor, that's great. If you like multifamily, if you like assisted living, we got closers for that. If you're a developer, we got closers for that, all across the spectrum.
And similar to how not every agent has the same specialty, different escrow officers can specialize in different transaction types. So
Right.
that's a good call out too. I have one last
Yeah, and
title question. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, like today, just for example, just not, but, and I get these calls all the time. An agent called me, and I've known her, actually trained her when she was a new agent back when I was a broker trainer. She called me and she said, Andy, I'm about to go list this property, and it's a guy from California, and uh, he's got this property under contract through what's called a novation and indemnification agreement. What is that? And I said, it sounds to me kind of like it's an assignment type of deal that he's working on. Let me get you with somebody. So literally, we have a closer in my office here, and we have them in every office, but in my office here in Beaumont, and I said, send me that document, and she sent it to me. I sent it to the escrow officer. Escrow officer said, I'm calling her right now, and she answered her question. She got it done. You know, And that's just one example. And literally, that it doesn't happen every day, but it happens very, very often. Had another good friend of mine. He's a local real estate broker. He was listing a property. It was a ranch that they wanted to sell using a 1031 exchange and buy a big property down here at Bolivar Peninsula. And he said, Andy, I don't know about these 1031 exchanges. I don't know about that. My seller doesn't know about it. I said, I got you, man. No problem. And so I talked with the seller first of all, because I know a bit about 1031s. And then I got him with our 1031 attorney. We actually own a 1031 exchange company as well. And got it done. He did the exchange flawlessly. He said, man, that was easy as could be. I said, yeah, well, when you're dealing with the right people, that's the way it's supposed to go. Those are just a couple of, I literally have so many examples like that. That's just a couple.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing those. I have one last title related question. And so
Okay.
in a transaction, a typical, residential transaction that's not off market, you have a buyer's agent and you have a seller's agent. Who is the title company working for? And is there such a thing as a bifurcation between buyer and seller where you're getting one side representing one versus the other, or is it dual representation, or how do you see that?
Yeah. The title company is a disinterested third party. That's the short answer. We are not, siding with the buyer or the seller. We are absolutely, completely disinterested. Our business is issuing title insurance policy. We make money off of title premiums. We're an insurance company. So our job is to research the property and research the people that are involved in the transaction to make sure that any potential, any issues are cleared before closing, which reduces our risk of there being a claim against the title policy. So we're completely disinterested. Good question.
Yeah, no, thank you. Like I said, selfishly, I'm filling in a lot of gaps in my own knowledge with this conversation, and I think it's a good topic, one we haven't done before, and one that I'm hopeful my listeners will appreciate as well.
Yeah, and let me say this too, in that a lot of times we get the question, well, who picks the title company? And the common thought is that, well, whoever pays for it gets the pick. Actually, in practice, that's usually what happens. Just to be fair, that is what happens. But according to the RESPA, the Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act, the seller cannot, if the seller is paying for the title policy, it's negotiable. Okay, buyer can pick. It's a negotiable item. The seller cannot make the deal dependent on that title company. It's a negotiable item, and it's because the buyer should have some say so, in where they're closing, right, or who's issuing the title policy. If the buyer is paying for the title policy, they can pick the title company, and it's non-negotiable. Okay, I get that question a lot. And but in practice, normally what happens is whoever's paying for it picks the title company, and you just have to go that way.
That's an important nuance because, again, I think most people just respond to whatever email they get from whatever title
Yeah,
company reaches out to them, and without thinking any further about it.
yeah. And so I've got a relationship with a lot of agents out there just from being in the business for so long. And I tell them, I'm like, look, even when they like closing with us. They've got a relationship with us. They enjoy closing with us. They like to close here. And sometimes they'll say, yeah, but the seller is saying we got to close. We got to close over here. And I tell them, I'm like, look, you don't have to. It is negotiable. Now, don't lose the deal over it, but just know you have some say so in the matter. You can say, look, I would really rather close over here. Got a relationship over here. I think they're going to do a great job for us. Maybe I had a bad experience at this other. Maybe they had a bad experience at this other particular company that they're wanting to go to. So the buyer does have some say so. So, um, you know, selfishly on my part, I tell buyers agents, don't just go with it. If you don't want to close there, at least try. And many times the seller doesn't care either. Yeah.
Especially if you're positioning a reputable company as the alternative, right?
That's correct. That's correct. Now, once again, I do tell the buyer that, like, look, if this is the deal that you want and the seller's insisting on closing there, don't lose the deal over it.
Yeah.
You don't have to lose the deal over it, but you at least try.
Yeah. Makes
Mhm,
sense. All
mhm.
right. A lot of good food for thought. Now, I want to spend the balance of the time we have together. You have an incredible variety of experience. Like you said, you started as a broker. You have your job now, and you're also an investor, both actively and passively. I don't even know where to pick to start there, but I guess you've made a career out of it. So you have your day jobs that have been adjacent to real estate, but you also use that. Not every real estate adjacent day job professional invests in real estate, but it seems like you, over the decades that you've been doing this and been in and around it, you've had your own strategy and your own evolution. Can you share
Yeah,
just a little bit about like kind of how you started with your personal investing and then why you're now on the passive side of the fence?
absolutely. I read Rich Dad Poor Dad back when I turned 30 years old. I'm 57 now. I read Rich Dad Poor Dad and then The Richest Man in Babylon, of course, some of the some foundational books here, right? And I had been in real estate for just a couple of years. And my history before that, I actually have a master's in education. I used to be a teacher, which is why I like teaching so much. But when I got into real estate, I was like, oh, okay, all right. I see you can make some money doing this, right? This is like, I can wrap my mind around this. It just really just appealed to me. So once I got a little bit of money, I'd been selling real estate for 2 years, and I just I did well with it just from the very beginning. I went into business with my mom. She was one of the owners of the Remax here, and she got me up and running. Always thank her for that. And so I was able to get some success pretty quickly as an agent and get some money put aside. And my first deal, I love telling this story because it's like the origin story. I was trying to find a deal, and there was these two houses that had been on the MLS. The seller was selling them together for like I think like 110,000. One was a 3-2 and one was a 2-1. This was back in 2000. So it was a 3-2 and a 2-1, 110,000 for both of them in an okay little area, great school district. Two pier and beam houses built in probably the 40s, and they were sitting on the market for a long time. And I thought, what if that seller would split them up, right? So I called the agent. I knew the agent. I said, "Hey, Jeannie, would the seller be willing to, I want to buy that one that they're selling next door because they had a tenant in. They were living in one, they had a tenant in one next door. I want to buy that one that they have rented, and then that maybe that'll make it easier for you to sell that other one. You get it, right?" So I offered 29.9 for a 2 bedroom, 1 bath with a tenant in it. It was getting 650 a month, and they took it. And I mean, it was
Wow.
cash flowing. I know. And it's like, it's not a lot of money, but to me, it was like a huge deal. I mean, I'm like, I did it. I made a good invest, and it was a great. If you look at the ROI in it, it was fantastic, right? And so, man, as once that bug bites you, man, it's hard to go back. And from there, I just started growing my portfolio a little bit at a time. And I would just tell everybody, all my realtor friends, all my realtor colleagues, if you have anything, let me know before you list it. Every deal I ever found was from a real estate agent. I mean, that's how I never went and found a deal on my own. It was always from a real estate agent. They would bring it to me, and I had a real simple formula for analyzing, is this going to work or not? And the formula worked, and I just kind of came up with it, and it turned out to be a pretty good formula. And it was very very conservative. And so over time, I didn't work up to a huge portfolio of properties. I think the most I got up to was like maybe 31 doors, something like that. But and it was a mixture of little single family, some light commercial, little apartment complex, duplexes, triplexes. But Aaron, just that, it's made all the difference in my life. I mean, those properties that I started acquiring back then, at that time, I mean, it's literally going to be a huge part of my retirement, and enable me in the not too distant future, just doing that. It was just a little bit at a time. So about 2 years ago, I'm looking at retirement on the horizon, and I'm thinking, I don't want to keep managing these properties. This is a lot. It's quite a bit. And I had a property manager, Debbie Hanna, did a great job managing them, but still, I was still involved a lot. And I was like, okay, I got to find the exit door on getting out of these properties and getting into something else. And that's when I happened upon Total Wealth Academy, where I met you. And I went there, and I'm sorry the story's long. Yeah. So I went with Debbie Hanna, my property manager. She was a guest speaker one night, and I just went to with her to support her. She had a success story to share. She was a member of Total Wealth. I'm like, I'm going to come support you, Debbie. And so we all drove over there, and I walked up to the top of Total Wealth Academy, and they have all those syndicators on the right
Yeah.
side, and I'm like, who are these people? What is this? I had no idea. I'd never even heard of it. And by the end of the night, I had drank the Kool-Aid, man. I was like, nobody ever told me about this syndication thing. So I started selling my properties and I did well with them. And as I sold them, I would start investing passively. And I'm now in 5 different deals. And so that's how I got into it. I learned about it. I was like, this is it. This is the way I want to go. And that's what I did. So now I'm in multifamily deals, and I'm also invested in a big commercial portfolio over in it's out of Idaho, but they've got properties in Idaho, Utah, Washington. It's a really interesting commercial fund that's doing very well. So yeah, that's how it happened. And I still have 6 more doors that I'm waiting for interest rates to come down, and I'll sell those and finish moving it passively. But right now it's just not a great time to sell them.
So let me make sure there's a lot of stuff I would love to ask about there, but let me make sure I heard the chronology correct. So around 2000, 25 years ago, you started scaling a portfolio. You slowly and methodically built it up to about 31 units mixed across, single family up through light commercial and small multifamily. And then over time, you talked about, discovering syndication and passive investing as you start to have an eye on retirement. And then that's where this kind of shift of like, hey, I like the term harvest, harvest some of this equity and turn it into something that's more passive and put my trust and, obviously there's a ton of due diligence. We'll talk about that in a second, but like you
Yes.
place your money with operators that you believe in the plan that they have, and they can steward the money. They can take the operational burden. They can take the phone calls, and you can, be an observer and a beneficiary of that work without having to bear the burden yourself. Did I capture that pretty well?
You captured it perfectly.
Yeah, and it's an interesting shift because I think one of the reasons I was so excited to like be able to talk to you, at this length and depth is that 25, 30 years of experience, like you can't learn that from a YouTube video, right? Like that's something that you learn through life. And I think you
Ooh,
also have a
man.
family, you have kids that grew, into adulthood. I know, I see how much you care about being a father, and all this stuff evolves in real time. And I think one of the things I really like to emphasize on this show, it's called the hybrid real estate professional, because nobody is very singular in their life anymore, especially in this world. It's like we're all wearing multiple hats, father, husband, employee, investor, business owner, all these different things. And I think it's that unique intersection that we have that makes us who we are. And so this kind of evolving journey that you've had, and then allowing yourself to acknowledge the various like pivot points in your life. I think there's just a really cool story to tell there, and being okay with what you started with not being what you end with. I think some people get really committed to like, oh, I'm just going to buy one single family home for 20 years and then I'm going to retire. They model it out on a spreadsheet and it sounds really good in the moment, but life is just so not linear like that. And so to be
Hmm.
able to follow the signals as they present themselves and let yourself evolve, I think like that's the real story,
Yeah.
that I see when I hear you tell, your journey.
Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly right. And I like the word you used, signal. It was always clear to me when there was an opportunity that presented itself. And I'm not afraid to pull the trigger. I'm just not. And I've got to say that especially in my active investing, I did really well with the choices that I made, and my methods were good, and I made good choices. But it was a lot of work. Man, it's a lot of work. But when you love it, it just doesn't feel like work. I mean, I wake up just I just love challenges, and I love when these opportunities pop up and executing on them. And then when that signal came, literally at Total Wealth Academy, and I learned about syndications, I was like, I mean, I just knew. this is it. This is what I'm going to do. And so when I feel it, I'm not afraid of executing on it. Yeah, and I know we'll talk a little bit about due diligence because I've had to learn that as I've gone along, and I would probably do things a little bit differently in retrospect. But for the most part, I'm very happy with the way things are going.
And it's interesting because, like you said, you have a bias for action. You enjoyed the journey of learning how to operate. I'm sure you had a property manager that you had a long-term relationship with that you trusted. And it sounds like you weren't the person that was like, oh my God, I'm scared of 3 a.m. toilet calls. I'm not going to do this. You were someone who leaned into the challenge and you enjoyed
And
that, like that journey of building. So to me, one of the hardest things is when you're used to being, having some degree of control and influence, then to turn fully passively where you literally legally have no influence, right? You can maybe call
Mhm.
the person and try and pressure them, but like legally, operationally, it is written into law that you as a limited partner, do not
That's
have any
right.
operational control in a syndication. Was that a tough bridge to cross, where you basically are ceding control and putting complete trust and faith in someone else?
I'll be honest, it for me it wasn't, and I am by nature I am a trusting person, and I got to know everybody that I invested with, and I felt comfortable moving forward, and I knew it was a risk. I mean, I went into it fully knowing that it was a risk, and I said, "Well, here we go." And you've probably said this on your podcast before. You bet on the jockey, not on the horse, right? So and that's what I did. And with one exception, had one deal that's unfortunately not worked out that nobody could have foreseen. But other than that, the everybody that I've invested with, things are moving along very nicely. And to answer your question, it just wasn't. I just didn't have a lot of trouble doing it. I mean, once I make my mind up, I go, and that's really if you look at my trajectory just since college, there's a lot of things like that, a lot of big changes that I made, and once my mind is made up, I just don't mind doing it. And I don't know what you just said. You just said a bias for action. I love that. That's a perfect way to put it. I do have a bias for action, and now I've been approached by a number of people to become a GP. They're like, look, you know how to do this. You can do this and I have a lot of respect for people like you and your wife who made that leap and who've done it. I'm not ready for that just yet. I mean, just my gut. I'm just not ready. I want to keep learning more. I'm just not comfortable enough. But I feel I'm going to get there in the not too distant future. I'm waiting for my passive income to hit a level where I can devote myself full time to it, and then I'll lean into that. But I just haven't. I just know myself, and I'm like, I want to know. I want to feel more comfortable before I make that particular. Because that's a big leap once you do that.
Yeah, and I actually think that, so I have a theory of why it wasn't as hard for you to cross that bridge, right? You had already been doing it for a long time and being active, and you're in a different season of life. Your kids are growing up. You have your career is evolving. Like there's other
Hmm.
elements of your life other than just investing in real estate. And I'm sure at
Yeah.
some point it's like, okay, I see something I like. I see people that I'm getting to know that I believe I can trust. I like the plans that they're putting together. And I have the money I can cycle out of these other assets and put with them. And I don't
Hmm.
have to run it. It's not so that would be my take based
Yeah.
on what you told me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But and then, learning if you ever want to be a syndicator yourself, like we invested passively in a couple deals before we took the leap. And I think that's one of the best ways to learn because you see how people think, you see the investor relations side, you see all the
Yep.
quarterly reporting and communications. Sometimes you see things you don't like, that you wouldn't want to do. And I think it's good to taste, before you brew, so to speak. And
Yeah. Yeah.
so that's another element. And just because you invest passively doesn't mean you have to eventually become an active GP or a syndicator. You can just invest passively and enjoy your life, right?
That's exactly right, and I very well may do that. We will see. And actually, I'll just to be completely frank, what interests me the most is investor relations. I picture myself like if I do get involved in syndications, that's the end I would want to be on. That's just my nature. It's because to me it's education. It all goes back to education for me, and that's what I enjoy the most. Operations, I'm just not as strong with operations, and I'm not as comfortable there. So, if I do go that route, that's kind of how I see it. Teaming up with someone who's strong in operations, let me handle the investor relations end of it. So, but we'll see what happens. Right now, I love my job that I have right now with Capital Title, and it interestingly, what's happened is I'm now merging the two because I'm getting relationships with investors like yourself and many others out there that I'm able to partner with teams here at Capital Title to help you all out, helps me out as well. So right now, I like the spot that I'm sitting in because I feel like I'm providing a good service to the investor community while still, benefiting me, myself, and my company, and just keeping me in the mix because I love this stuff. I just love it.
Yeah. And when you love it and you put yourself around it, opportunities, some people say, "Oh, you're so lucky, you're surrounded, stuff just comes to you." It's like, no, you're putting yourself out there.
Yes.
You're creating your own luck. You're going out to
Yeah.
events, you're educating other people, you're putting yourself in the room, so to speak. But
Yeah.
I have one question. I know we're almost at time here, but we promised we talk about due diligence. And I guess I'll make it a very simple question. When you made that switch and you started evaluating opportunities, what was the number one most important thing about either the operator or the deal itself that you looked for before you were comfortable making an investment?
When admittedly, when I first invested, I didn't know how to fully vet a deal. I just didn't. I know, I mean, 20 times more than I knew at that time. I went with, operators who I knew, but I knew how to read the pro forma. I understood it. I understood the numbers. I didn't know exactly what questions to ask her. Hey, is this number like does a real like I know the questions to ask now, but even then I really didn't. So it just came down to if the deal looked good and I'm looking at it, okay, their numbers look good. And I talk to this person and I get to know them and I trust them, I'm okay with it. And that was just me, and I would, of course, ask anybody that I knew within the community, "Hey, what do you think about this person?" I would do at least some due diligence there to try to vet them. But really, Aaron, what it came down to was just working with somebody that I felt I could trust. And there just comes a point where you just got to go with your gut on it. And because two of the people I invested with had never done a deal before.
Yeah.
This was their first deal. And actually, and you know what? Those are going really well because what somebody told me was that, sometimes those guys, their first one, they are going to bust. They're going to work really hard to make sure that deal works. And I'm like, that makes sense. And as I talk to them, I could just feel it. I'm like, all right, these guys are going to do everything they can to make it work. And both those deals are going really, really well.
As someone who just raised money as a first time operator, on our first deal of this magnitude, I appreciate that answer. And it's
Yeah.
actually really, I did a lot of reflecting on the people that ultimately ended up investing in our deal. And we asked them a lot about, what ultimately compelled them to invest. And it's consistent with what you just said. Do they trust you? Do they trust you to make decisions? Everyone knows that your plan, your exact pro forma that you created on year one is not going to play
Yeah.
out dollar for dollar, minute for minute over the course of a 10-year business plan. Everyone knows that, I hope, right? So do they
Yeah.
trust you to be able to navigate the twists and turns, the curveballs, the title issues, the construction
Yeah.
delays, the, tenant problems, whatever they are, like, and that's at the end of it, you know, if they can trust you and they see how you think and they like how you think, then that really is what underlies the entire process. And I like what you said too about first time operators definitely are going to want to get their, you can't build a track record if you don't get results. And so you
Yeah.
are going to work. I can say, I guess from my personal experience, like we are going to work as hard as we possibly can to smash our projections out of the park and make our investors very happy that they chose to trust us.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's proven to be true because in those two examples specifically, they both of those guys have worked really, really hard, and the deals are going well. And even though it was their first deal, I mean, they have a history, they have a work history, and one of them, he had done over 100 fix and flip properties. I mean, the dude was a beast when it came to construction and knowing his numbers. And so as I talked with him, I'm like, man, this guy knows what he's doing. I mean, he understood numbers. He understood what's going to be profitable. He understood how to set a budget. He had crews to get it done. And I really like that. Like the GP, he's the one that's doing the work. I really like that. And he had a really good property manager that he partnered up with. Man, this sounds good. And the other guy was an engineer, project manager, and a very, very detail oriented project manager. And he was the last one that I invested with. And by that time, I kind of got a feel for what questions to ask. And I wore him out. He answered every single question. We talked so many different times. And it turns out, like I said, no, his project is going real well. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that, because I think it's important to
Yeah.
hear, people that are considering making their first passive investment, like what's the emotional experience, what's the real process for making that type of decision, especially if it's a pivot or an uncomfortable space. So I appreciate you sharing
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And there's, like I said, I've learned so much more about due diligence. And one book that I read a while back I got a lot of books I can recommend, but one book that I recommend that really opened my eyes is called The Hands-Off Investor. The Hands-Off Investor, Brian Burke. I wish I would have read it, sooner. I don't know as I would have made any different choices, but I would have at least gone in my eyes a little bit more wide open. But The Hands-Off Investor by Brian Burke, that is an excellent entry-level book on how to vet a deal. And that's just one, but it's a good one.
It's really easy read. And the irony is that I read that book while it was about 2 weeks before we launched raising capital, right? Because I wanted to put myself in the mind of somebody who's considering an investment, right? And so it works both ways, right? If you're somebody who wants to raise money for a deal, those are the elements that are the academic ways of thinking about how to evaluate an investment. And then, of course, if you are considering an investment too, it's a great read. You know how I know Andy loves books is because he runs a book club too. And
That's right.
yeah, that's a good way to learn. Well, Andy, we're about out of time here, but this was a great conversation. I learned a ton about title, and also appreciate you being forthcoming with your journey and your evolution.
Yeah.
There's a lot of value that I hope my listeners get. Where can people find you if they want to learn more about you, Capital Title, or any other way to get in touch?
Certainly. My cell phone number, and feel free to text or call, is 409-658-3695. Email, pretty easy, ahemmings@ctot.com, Capital Title of Texas, ctot.com. But yeah, reach out to me. I work in Beaumont. I live down here in Southeast Texas, but I have relationships with Capital Titles all over the state and even throughout the country. I'm on the National Commercial Operations team for Capital Title. And so I've got relationships with investors all over the state. So even though I'm tucked down here, down in the Southeast Texas, little old Beaumont, I've got a wide network to tap into to help connect investors with whatever team they need and help however they need.
Awesome. We'll make sure all that information is included in the show notes. And thanks again for coming on. And hopefully we'll do it again someday soon.
Thanks, Aaron. And congratulations on all your success.
Thank you for making it to the end of today's episode. As you may know, podcasts are very difficult to grow organically. If you're getting value from today's episode, I'd deeply appreciate if you can take 30 seconds to leave my show a 5-star rating and review. This will go a long way to helping me reach more listeners just like you. Thank you so much in advance.